story of Putin that not only I have written about, but many Russians have died for, and in fact the book is dedicated to free Russian journalism. Before I go on, and to tell you the story of the book, I also want to acknowledge, before time runs out and all that, that this project benefited enormously from many students. And those of you who are amongst my students, and those of you who are interested in Russia, might be very interested in knowing that the Havighurst Center last week, we launched a whole new web page, which has been widely circulated in Russia, on Putin's Russia. This book is not for sale in Russia. In fact, it's not for sale outside the United States. But the internet is another thing entirely. And people who visit the internet can see the 100-page bibliography of the book, all the documents relating to the building of a certain palace, the specific document that I'm going to talk about today, which revealed the authoritarian plans of the regime, the very first set of documents produced by a commission in the early 1990s that recommended by name that Putin be let go from his post, documents from Stasi archives, which Sarah Kristen Muller gathered, translated, and analyzed as part of the summer project, transcripts of a Russian prosecutor. These transcripts were put on the Russian internet. Most of them have now been attacked and taken down. They're here both to listen to and they're transcribed. There's a live link of Russian politics timeline, some information on my meetings with Putin, and also other just cool sources. So while people in Russia may not be able to get this book or get it yet, nevertheless, it is widely available. And yes, we have alerted the Vice President for Information Technology to warn him to be prepared for a directed denial of service attack. So when we think about Russian-American relations today, we realize that we are in the midst of the most serious crisis since the end of the Cold War, after the Russian annexation of Crimea. But looking at the way in which the United States responded to that crisis, we don't see the movement of the Sixth Fleet, which is what used to happen in the 60s and the 70s. We didn't see the ending of cultural exchanges. The Bolshoi Ballet's tour of whichever country has not been canceled. What happened was the U.S. Treasury Department announced that a group of individuals would have their assets frozen. This is seen now as pretty normal. We've normalized this as, oh yes, these are sanctioned individuals. But this is absolutely new in international relations. Of course, there are people in Iran, there were people in Saddam Hussein's Iraq who also suffered this, but as part of a much larger closing down of the space available for those two countries. Why did they take this action of sanctioning individuals? My argument in the book is because the U.S. government was admitting publicly, beginning last March and April, what they had long known privately, that a group of individuals around what they call a senior Russian government official, in other words, Vladimir Putin, have been predating, have been looting, have been marauding through the Russian economy on a scale not seen since the Tsars. This is a huge, huge amount of criminal behavior. Transparency International estimates that the annual cost of corruption in Russia is $300 billion. The annual cost. The Russian central bank itself admits that since 2005, $350 billion has left the country in capital flight, and it hasn't come back. And Credit Suisse, a institution not exactly dedicated to pointing out that there are huge gaps in the world between rich and poor, issued a report last year on global wealth in which it said that in Russia, 110 people own 35% of the wealth of this very rich country. The gap between rich and poor is greater in Russia than in any country in the world, with the exception of the odd Caribbean island where there's a resident billionaire. So this is not the 1% problem. We are way beyond the 1%.
Is that you?
Yeah. No, it's a good thing.
Well, we got to see it.